Hey guys, it's Monica at Academic Phoenix Plus, and welcome to another exciting episode. This time we are going to talk about lighting. This is just an introduction to the lighting toolkit provided by Maya. That includes the ones that are originally from Maya, which have been around for a long time, and also Arnold lighting. So this is the file that I am going to be using to demonstrate the lights. You can download this desk at academicphoenixplus.com. Also, if you are in the mood, you can also model, UV map, and texture this in a previous tutorial. So it's up to you which one you would like to do. You can either model and texture the whole thing, or you can just download it at academicphoenixplus.com. All right, so just in case you guys didn't know about this, I highly recommend that you take a look at solidangle.com. They have a lot of really great information, including about lights. So I'm going to be basically reviewing the things that they already reviewed. Now, it is a video, so it might be a little bit different and easier to see the effect. And I'm also going to go thoroughly into the attributes. But yes, check out solidangle.com and see what's new and also what's going on and so on and so forth. So definitely highly recommend them. All right, so here we have our scene. We have an infinity curve. And for the ones who are in photography, I've taken photography, and infinity curve is used to demonstrate a model. So this is basically kind of like a IKEA catalog. Now, when I try to render it, if you go up here to the Arnold and then click render, it's going to be pitch black. And the reason why is because there are no lights. So there's two types of lights that we can find. We can go to create lights, and I'm going to tear this off. And we have these lights that have been around with Maya since I used Maya, which was, I don't even want to age myself, so I'm not even going to bother, but a while. So anyway, moving on. So these lights have been around for a long time. Now, Arnold has its own set of lights as well. We have lights provided by Maya and also lights provided by Arnold. I'm going to go over the Maya lights first, and then after that, I'll go over the Arnold lights. Because Arnold is, we have these lights that have been around with Maya since I use Maya. Some of these lights do not work, and that's okay because they were very expensive. And what I mean by expensive is industry term because it means that it takes up time and it's company money. We're going to go down the list. The first one is an ambient light. And you're going to see that it turns into a little sun here as an icon, and I'm going to pull it up. The ambient light means that the light goes through the environment at a even rate. So there's no fall off or anything. So if I go to Arnold though and I render, you're going to see that it doesn't render. And that's because Arnold can't read ambient lights. Now, if you really want to see an ambient light, then you can use Maya software. Maya software will pick it up. So as you can see, the light is emitting in all directions evenly, and it's not the best. Let me see if I can go to raw. There we go. Raw looks better, but it still doesn't look very good. We're not using ambient light. Now, I'm sorry I used that first. It's at the top of the list. It should be at the bottom, but what can I say? Moving on. The directional light. The directional light is a light source that emits light in one direction for infinity. So I'm going to render here. And what's cool about the directional light is very similar to the sun. All the shadows are going to be basically even and parallel. The light source comes from way out in the back. And even if I move this up and down, notice that the shadows don't actually move. The reason why is because this is just a symbol and it does not represent scale or anything. So it's just actually a symbol, and it's just letting you know which direction the light is going in. So notice that I'm scaling and nothing's happening to the shadows. Now, if I rotate it though, that's where it makes a difference. So now it's pointing at a different direction. I'm going to zoom out just a little bit so you guys can see. I'm going to scoot this over so you can see a little bit more of the shadow. I'm going to stop because my computer is chugging because Arnold is eating up all my CPU. So notice that the shadows are basically parallel, and this is perfect light source for the sun, for example, or the moon, something that's really far away that you need parallel shadows. Now, there is an issue with a directional light, and that is if I am indoors. So let's pretend I suddenly decided to create a box, and I'm just like, great, I am inside now and I'm ready to create my interior. Well, if I press play, you're going to see that it's completely black. And the reason why is because this is just a symbol, as I mentioned before, the light. And if I scroll out, whoa, here's my box. It's lighting it from the outside. So light can't go through the box. Now, there's ways around it, of course, but for interior lighting, you usually do not use directional lights unless you're creating sunlight. So, for example, if I want to create a window, like so, now go back inside here. Press play. You can see that I now have a window. I'm going to try to scoot everything around here. I go to object mode. I'm going to grab my light, and then I'm going to attempt to show you everything all at once. So I can rotate this and go to the side and kind of get like a window. See that? So that's basically what you want to use directional lights for. All right, since we're here, we might as well talk about the attributes. So the attributes of a light has several things. You got the color, which I'm going to press play here, which is fun because you could change the color of your light. So if you wanted to make it look like evening, you want to use kind of like a dark purple color, kind of like a cinematography night. The reality is that night is not very bright, but because we're so used to theater lighting and film lighting, we associate dark blues with night. So keep that in mind. A little bit orange to make it look like it's dusk, and so on and so forth. Intensity is exactly what it sounds like. How intense is your light? So if you want it to be intensity of 3, you'll see that the light gets even brighter. So if I go even brighter, I can basically blow out my scene. So you have to be very careful. So that's intensity. Illuminate by default means, do you want to see the light or not? So this is one quick way of turning it on and off. Notice that it disappeared my light, so I'm going to close it and turn it back on. There it is. Emit by diffuse means, do you want to see the color? So I'm going to rotate this light a little bit so we can actually see some of the color of the desk. There you go. I'll do a little better job here. Okay, cool, dramatic lighting. Well, in the past, when you turned off emit by diffuse, the color would disappear, but because we're using Arnold, it might not be able to read it, and that's fine. There's other ways you can turn it off. So you have the color, the intensity, illuminates by default, and these two do not work with Arnold. However, they do work with Maya software. And if you still have Mental Ray, it'll work with Mental Ray. So let's take a look at Arnold itself. Arnold provides its own temperature gauge, its own attributes, which are very advanced and really nice. So one of them is called use color temperature, and that will activate the temperature here. This uses what's called Kelvin. Kelvin, if anybody doesn't know, is what scientists basically use to gauge the movement of particles. So it's energy. And 0 means that there's no particles or molecules moving, and then the rest are the faster the molecules move or the particles move, the faster the warmer the light will become. So right now it's a 6500 Kelvin, which sounds like a lot, but you can actually make it even warmer still, and it starts to turn blue. And if you start getting it a little less, it starts to turn orange. So this is actually considered accurate colors. Now, it is scientifically driven, or mathematically and scientifically driven, so keep that in mind. But it doesn't mean that you have to use color temperature. You can always use the color above to be artistic. So feel free to eyeball it with color or use color temperature. It is up to you. However, you do have to recognize that if I change this to like a red or a pink or anything up here, the use color temperature overrides this color. The next one is called exposure, and as it's increased, the exposure makes it look like it's brighter. So you want to play around with intensity and exposure. Moving on, we have angle. Angle, as I start to increase it, notice what it's doing to the shadow itself. This is a very important part of lighting. And the reason why it's important is because in real life, we do not have sharp shadows. Unless you're being hit by a laser or something, then you can have a sharp shadow. But really there's always a little bit of a fuzzy edge on shadows. Now, what's fun about this is that it really is going to tell you the color versus the shadows, what type of light it is. So for example, if I wanted to go for a little bit of a sunset color, that means that the sun is really deep in the horizon, and therefore the shadows are going to be very soft. So I will increase my angle to soften the shadows. Notice how it's starting to break up the shadows. However, if it's the middle of the day and it's super warm outside and I'm in Florida, then you probably want to go for a warmer color, increase the exposure, increase the intensity, and then it's going to look like and make the shadows sharp, and you're going to get something that looks like a different time of day. So that's what you need to do when you're observing, is what's going on with the daylight? What's happening to the shadows? The shadows are 50% of the information of the light. So it's not just the color, but it's also the shadow information. Now I'm going back to my sunset color here, and I'm increasing my angle. And as I watch Arnold struggle, just render away. I'm going to make a selection here. Sometimes it starts to get a little noisy, and that's where samples come in. Samples basically means how many times do you want this area to be sampled. So if I increase it to 3, it's going to sample it about 3 times. And you can see right away that it turns very clear. It's very smooth. The gradient's very pretty. So be careful though, because the higher, you don't want to go crazy and start going like, well, I'm going to just do 12. This increases your render time dramatically. So you have to choose your battles. You have to find out which is the perfect number to get a perfect shadow. Normalize is very important when it comes to scale. If I turn normalize off, you're going to notice that it disappears. Actually, let me turn this off. And it's based on scale. And because our light source doesn't really use scale, I'm going to keep normalize on. Now, what's fun about lights is that you can turn off the shadow. So now you have this really flat light. And the purpose for that is that in case you need to fill a space with a muted color, then that doesn't affect anything, doesn't affect shadows, then this is the perfect way to do it. It's very similar to an ambient light, except that it's got a direction. Notice how flat everything is, and notice how even it is. It's pretty wild. Now this is, notice that we can also see everything. Because there are no shadow information, our window is ignored. So it just goes right through the geometry. It just ignores all the geometry and just lights everything evenly. So that's cast shadows. Scrolling down a little bit more, we have shadow density. So sometimes you don't want it to be super pitch black. Sometimes you may want to have it a little bit like this. So again, Arnold's purpose is to give you complete control over your lighting. We are not using any type of fog, so we're not going to worry about volumetric shadow, so we're going to skip on that. We'll touch base on that later. And I honestly don't like using fog with directional lights. I usually use it with spotlights. And finally, visibility. So remember at the top when I was trying to say, hey, this should work, emit, diffuse, and emit specular? Well, this is where you actually have control over it. So for example, if I turn this off, you're going to notice that, there it goes. All the color has disappeared except for the specularity. So it ignores all of the color maps and everything that you have and just keeps everything else, which would be specularity, subsurface, indirect volume, and that's it. Specularity means that if I turn this off, notice that my light source suddenly doesn't have highlights. There are no more highlights. So the purpose for this is I want to control the color and I don't want to have the highlight. It's very useful if you're trying to composite. So for example, let's say for the diffuse, I have an eyeball and my eyeball is great and it's being lit, but the director wants the highlight to be somewhere else. Then I would have to create 2 lights. One light that has the diffuse and no specularity, and then the other one would be having a specularity and no diffuse. And I would move the light of the highlight in a particular angle that the director would want. So that's happened to me before. So then I have 2 lights illuminating 1 eyeball. All right, so subsurface scattering, we don't actually have subsurface, but this is a way to control it. Indirect lighting, same thing. Indirect lighting means all the bounce lights. Do you see how my scene just suddenly got dark? Indirect lighting, Arnold automatically provides bounce lights for us, which is really interesting. Mental Ray does not provide that unless you turn on global illumination and final gather. But here, you actually have lights that bounce automatically, and that's pretty sweet. So indirect just means that sometimes we just don't need that bounce light, so we just turn it off. And now look at that. It's like a film noir. Very dramatic. I just need a detective hat, a sign that says Detective Monica or Instructor Academic Phoenix. Who knows? Anyway, and finally volume. If that we had any volumetric lighting or any type of fog, this would affect it as well. Okay, guys, it's been over 15 minutes talking about lighting. We've gone over 2 lights, one that doesn't work in Arnold and one that does work. But the most important part is the attributes. The attributes are key to understanding how to use your lights and how to illuminate your environment. So in the next tutorial, I am going to continue on and show you the other lights that we have, including point light, spotlights, area lights, and volume light. So I hope you found this helpful. I know it was a lot of information. I really encourage you guys to explore Arnold, explore its lighting system and all of its toolkits. It's a lot of fun. If you have great models and great textures, having excellent lighting is key to making your stuff look professional. So hopefully that was helpful. Let me know if you guys have any questions. Feel free to leave a comment below. And of course, if you found this useful, please share with your friends. And also don't forget again to go to academicphoenixplus.com. You can download the files and you'll find so much more stuff like ebooks. Sometimes I write a blog and you can sign up for my newsletter and stuff like that. So I appreciate all of your support. Thank you so much, and I will see you next time.